afternoon, everybody. First off, please excuse my voice. I am battling back. Sunday I had absolutely no voice whatsoever, so I'm kind of working my way back. As Stephanie so graciously said, I am Tammy Mehlhaff. I'm with the Center for Children and Families as part of the De-Stress SCRAP, which is the development of systems for trauma response, education, and supportive solutions. Then that's way too long for a business card, so we just call it the De-Stress Grant. It's a collaborative effort between the hospitals, both St. V's and Billings Clinic, as well as Riverstone Health, the Center for Children and Families, Walla Walla University, and United Way. So that's where this information was culled from some of the trainings that Michelle and I do around town. We always talk about within our trainings, whether we're doing it for social services or education, we always talk about self-regulation because it's a very important topic, and also it's because you guys need those skills in order to work with your clients or your students or whoever you're working with. So to start off this presentation, I'm going to show you a video about self-regulation. It is geared more towards education, but it's still a really, really good example about what self-regulation is. Again, I'm pretty informal, so if you would like to ask questions at any time, feel free to raise your hand and I will get to you. So you can interrupt me, I don't care, you don't have to wait to the end. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it. So we're going to start off with a video.
Successful people have strong self-regulation skills. They use them every day. The skills help them consciously direct, sustain, and shift their attention when necessary. They help them monitor and manage their thoughts, behavior, and emotions in this complicated world of ours. 3 of the self-regulation skills, known as executive function skills, are cognitive. These are used to monitor and manage attention, thoughts, and behavior. A 4th self-regulation skill is the ability to monitor and manage emotions. These skills are not inborn, but they are teachable, and we depend on them every day, especially when the going gets rough. Just like adults, when students are upset or angry, it's hard for them to use their executive function skills because their strong emotions take over. This can also make it difficult for them to listen, remember rules, and stay focused on learning. So, learning to monitor and manage emotions allows students to recognize their strong feelings and use strategies to calm down. Then, they can use their executive function skills again. And research shows students with strong self-regulation skills have higher academic achievement and are less likely to act in impulsive or aggressive ways, or to withdraw when overwhelmed. They're also more likely to get along well with others and have strong social skills. Students with poor self-regulation skills can have emotional and behavioral problems and academic trouble and are more likely to be expelled from school, starting as early as preschool. When students learn and practice self-regulation skills, they can build academic achievement, social competence, and positive growth throughout their lives.
So really what self-regulation is like, if you think of self-regulation, you want to think of self-regulation kind of as a thermostat. A thermostat senses and measures temperature and compares it to a reading to a preset, compares that reading to that preset, that what you want that room to be, right? So when the reading passes that threshold, the thermostat either cools or heats the room, right? So that's the way that human self-regulation kind of works too. When we have a set point, and when we get a little, our self-regulation skills help us take it down just a little bit so we can get back to normal. Now, people with poor self-regulation skills or no self-regulation skills at all, any little thing could set them off, right? And they're not going to be able to regulate what's going on. Adolescents, as you saw in the video, adolescents with good self-regulation skills, better able to manage their emotions and behavior, better able to interact with others, and in the long run, Folks with good self-regulation skills show higher academic achievement, higher achievement in the business world. I'm going to show you here a video in just a second about the marshmallow test. Has anybody ever heard of that? Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. So really what we're talking about, this is the stemming off of the first reaction to an event. Being able to process what's going on and level off those emotions no matter how bad it might seem, you know, to be able to level those off. And planning is a huge part of self-regulation. To use this practice, we have to think about potential future actions. We have to imagine and picture in our minds what some of those alternate reactions might be. And this has to happen pretty quickly in some situations, doesn't it? Okay, so you heard me talk about the marshmallow test, and this test was originally done in the 1960s. And what they did was they took the subjects of the original test and followed them throughout their lives. And they found that the kids who were able to control their impulses in this test, and you'll see why in just a second, they actually did better in school. They had higher SAT scores, and they were actually more successful throughout their lives. They had a lot of a lower rate of obesity and disease, and self-control is really a built-in part of self-regulation as well. And these self-regulation skills are built into you. You start learning those really, really, really early on. So this is one of my favorite videos. It's kids with the marshmallow test, and I just enjoy it. I hope you will too. Now
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
skills you may have seen there. What were some of the things that those kids were doing to self-regulate?
Distracting.
Distracting,
Moving.
moving, doing that little song and dance routine.
A lot of fidgeting and, yeah, just like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A little smell here.
Yeah.
Smelling, trying to get that sensation in. Just did you notice the scene with the twins? They were sitting on their hands.
Yeah.
Self-regulation and action, right? Because that's part of one of the things that we talk about when we do our de-stress training. The self-regulation is cueing kids to help them learn regulation skills. For instance, like we have little kids in a line, like herding cats sometimes, right? But if you can get them to sit, they might like be touching each other and, okay, let's all put our hands in our pockets. Or let's calm down and let's put our hands on the table, kind of thing. Just teaching them basic self-regulation skills. So one of the components of, oh, okay, sorry about that. All right, so the reason why self-regulation is important, well, I talked about that, but one of the things that happens with self-regulation is a lot of times when people are self-regulated who have had a lot of traumatic experiences in their lives, what's going on is that the brain is concentrating in survival mode. So as you can see here from this diagram, you'll see that the cortex right here, which is the newest part of the brain, it doesn't really stop developing until your mid-20s. This is where emotional regulation, behavior inhibition, impulse control, all of that happens, okay? Survival mode is here in the limbic system, right in the middle there, that green area. And so in typical development, 9/10 of the energy that the brain is expending is being expended in cognition, so in the cortex here, in learning, social, emotional regulations, things like that. And survival is the last thing, okay? Because fight, flight, freeze is only supposed to last 90 seconds at a time. Just enough time to get us out of a situation, right? When somebody has gone through a lot of traumatic experiences, this gets inverted and cognition becomes the part that doesn't get as much energy. And people are focusing on survival, just getting through their day-to-day routine, okay? Sometimes moment by moment. So teaching folks self-regulation skills is very, very important with folks who've had a lot of trauma, okay? So another, excuse me, another component to self-regulation is EQ, or emotional intelligence. So having a higher EQ is a huge key component in self-regulation. So that means things like, well, we've seen a lot of, we know people who have maybe a very high IQ, you know, very low EQ. Michelle always uses the example of Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory. Yeah. Very, very, very high IQ, very, very, very low EQ. So having a high IQ does not necessarily equate with having a high EQ as well. They don't always go hand in hand. But there's several components to emotional intelligence, self-regulation and management, social skills, empathy, motivation and passion, and self-awareness. These are all the components of emotional intelligence. So why do you think having self-regulation skills are important? Anybody care to wager a guess? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller? Some people got it, yay! So the first reason why they're important is that working memory. That's the ability to hold information in your mind and be able to recall and use it. The second, inhibitory control. I have a hard time saying that word. That's the ability to master thoughts, distractions, and habits. That's the ability to pause and reflect before acting. So this is the thing that's going to keep you off of YouTube when you need to be getting your work done, right? Unless, of course, you need a break. Every once in a while, it's not a bad thing to watch cat video when you've had a lot of stressful work or a lot of work on your desk. But inhibitory control keeps you from watching cat videos all day.
So what does that mean for those of us that just stream a single show for an entire weekend?
True that.
Or inhibitory control.
Exactly. Okay, so then finally there's cognitive flexibility, and that's the capacity to switch gears and adjust to changing demands, priorities, and perspectives. So how many of, I'm sure this happens to everybody, but we're working on a project and all of a sudden the boss comes in and says, hi, I need you to do this now. Self-regulation is what helps us, first of all, control that impulse to go, don't you see the stack of work I have on my desk? And that's our first thing. We have to control that reaction, right? But it also is going to help us shift gears so we don't overreact. Oh my God, I've got so much work. I have to shift gears. Oh no, you're going to be able to like, all right, I got this. So having that flexibility is really, really good. So let's talk about some skills and what we want to emphasize when we're teaching folks how to regulate. When we look at emotional intelligence, one of the keys is knowing your emotions, being able to motivate yourself, managing relationships, recognizing and understanding the emotions of others, empathy. While nearly everyone can determine the difference between feeling happy and sad, knowing how emotions like jealousy and envy, shame and embarrassment, happy, sad, things like that, how they differ, that's very, very fundamental in to properly dealing with emotions. So asking clients if they can explain the similarities and differences between these emotions and which ones they identify with. There was an article in Psychology Today not too long ago that explained the importance of recognizing specific emotions in others as well. Practicing self-regulation helps your clients be better able to respond to situations where they understand the emotions of other people or that they're experiencing. For example, if your spouse is upset, knowing whether he or she is feeling embarrassment along with anger will determine how you should respond. How many of us have found ourselves in that situation with our spouses at one time or another? We think they're angry about something. This happens a lot in my relationships. My husband will think I'm angry about something when the truth of the matter is I'm really embarrassed or I'm overwhelmed or something else that's driving that anger. So it's really about recognizing that emotion, what the original emotion is first. So another very important component in self-regulation is helping your client being able to set goals. So research shows that reaching goals affects your motivation, your self-efficacy, and your learning, and making goal setting is essential to improving self-regulation skills. So goals make it easier for people to evaluate themselves, right? We all do. Anybody here ever set a little mini goal for themselves? For instance, for me, and when I go to the gym, I have to set a little mini goal. Like, I am going to go to the gym 4 days this week. And then I go to the gym 4 days, and then I can evaluate it against my past performance. So it could be anything. It could be work-related, personal goals. Having goals really helps you measure where you are at any given time, right? So setting those short-term goals often results in higher motivation and better self-regulation. Making sure, though, that your client's aspirations aren't set this high. Making sure that they're setting attainable goals is, if you have those goals up here, how many of you have ever set a goal? Everybody here set a goal, right?
Yeah.
How many of you have ever set a goal like, I am going to clean my entire house in 1 weekend? Right? Does it work? How do you feel when you don't succeed? If you can make a smaller goal, like, I'm going to clean out this closet this weekend. That's a better goal, right? Because it's smaller, more manageable. I used to have somebody tell me, Tammy, how do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So making sure that you're not setting your client and you are not setting those goals way this high, but maybe just like, okay, so this week we're going to work on just this. And making sure it's not an overwhelming task for them. Goals that are too difficult will have a very soothing effect and it'll work and your client will be able to find objectives that are moderately challenging for the best results. Okay? Reminding your clients too to monitor their behavior and consider whether they're doing things that they planned on and whether these plans are achieving the goals they identified. So stop and ask them, hey, I see you're doing this and this. Was this part of the original plan? Is this helping you succeed in your goal? Making sure that you're checking in with them, okay? Monitoring in this way can identify those counterproductive behaviors. So if you've got a stack of work like this on your desk, watching cat videos is going to be kind of counterproductive. This is not part of the plan. Unless, of course, you've worked in an appropriate length break and you can set your timer and all that good stuff. So making sure that they're not doing anything that's counterproductive, or you're not doing anything that's counterproductive to the plan. Encourage those positive self-talks. So for instance, they set a small goal. Let's go back to that closet, okay? You've cleaned out the closet. What are you going to do? You're not going to beat yourself up because you didn't get to the whole room, right? What are you going to do? Yes, I got that closet done. That counts as exercise. Bring on the chocolate, right? That's what I would do. So make sure that you're giving your clients good pep talks. Make sure that and encourage them to have that positive self-talk. That actually can help you. If they can't do that, then that can help you identify where they might have some problems in their thinking, right? Okay, adaptability. We all know change is hard, right? But we have to encourage adaptability. Because when your clients are showing difficulty with adapting to their life changes, that ability to self-regulate can become inhibited. It's important that they learn how to cope with change and adapt their behavior to different situations easily. So we've all had this happen to us, right? Where we're going along, and we have a plan, and something puts a crank in that plan, and plans have to change, right? Whether it be work or your personal life or whatever. And sometimes it's hard, but you have to learn how to adapt with it, right? So we need to encourage folks, our clients, our students, whoever that we're working with, ourselves to adapt to change. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever have any difficulty where you say maybe you have a child or an adult who grew up in a childhood where they had a lot of changes in their life? They moved every 6 months, and does that get in the way of their adaptability, or does it actually improve it because that they had to deal
That
with
can
so much
depend on
change?
how resilient the child is.
Yeah.
Some children they can adapt easily to those moves, those things like that. If they've had a lot of change, what I would recommend, and I'm not a therapist, I'm just going to put that out there right now, what I would recommend is maybe just going small, gradual changes, or maybe holding off on any change until a little while till they get used to a situation, and then just introducing it slightly and small in a small way, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing with that, just to pipe up a little, I worked with foster kids forever, the older ones as they transition, and by the time I got them at 16 or whatever they were, I've been through 100 placements or whatever. So yeah, they're great at change, they're great at adapting on the surface, but things that they don't do is that they never put down roots. They don't have any future thinking goals. They don't think that anyone's going to actually ever want them as a family. Like, they cannot think long term. It's very difficult for them. So maybe setting the 6 month goal, the one, those kind of small, and once they meet it, be like, oh my gosh, you made a 3 month goal, 1 month goal, whatever that looks like, and then try to encourage them to stick it out a couple months later. But they don't make any kind of future plans because they think that everything's going to end. So yeah, it makes them adaptable, but it also really impedes their ability to sort of think long term at all, and attach and engage with people. So,
And remember that folks who have a hard time adapting to change, these are the folks that are going to be more anxious. They might have some poor physical and mental health issues because of it. So giving them the ability or teaching them ways that they can cope with change. Creating a framework where they can assess the processes behind that change might be a good idea, helping them with that. And then again, reframing everything so that they can look at it in a positive way instead of putting all of those negative connotations to the change. Okay, practicing strategies for self-awareness. One of the most essential factors for self-regulation is self-awareness, obviously, right? Because if we don't know ourselves very well, can we regulate ourselves very well? If we don't know what our reactions are going to be to anything, you really have to be self-aware in order to self-regulate. So we want to be able to make sure that our clients are practicing these strategies so that they can become more self-aware. Know your strengths and weaknesses, helping them identify what makes them feel angry or what makes them happy, what makes them put negative connotations onto things. It may be beneficial to make a list of triggers that your clients have, because when they're triggered and they're anxious, that's the time that they need to self-regulate the most. So having a list of things that might trigger them is a good thing to have. Identifying those behaviors or actions that aren't useful when they are triggered, being able to identify those so that they can replace them with positive responses, with positive alternatives. And if you find that one of your clients has a hard time when they're feeling overwhelmed at work, encourage them to pencil in the time to take breaks. We are just as guilty of this as our clients, aren't we? So this is a good tip for everybody. Take a break. It's okay. We live in a society that values work, and that's all great, but what good is work if you're burned out? Okay. So let's talk about, for a few minutes, we talk about activities in our training. This is mostly towards students, but this can work with your clients as well. There's a lot of different activities that draw on self-regulation skills. For instance, sports encourages attention and focused attention and skill development. Those are all inherent to sports, right? These also help them draw on their ability to monitor their own actions, make quick decisions, and respond flexibly. Ongoing challenging aerobic activity can also improve your executive function as well. Same goes for yoga and meditation. Activities that support a state of mindfulness or non-judgmental awareness of moment-to-moment experiences. It helps people develop that sustained attention and self-awareness, right? Because when you're doing mindfulness practice, and how many of you have ever tried a mindfulness practice? Wonderful. So when you're doing mindfulness, you're just focusing on that moment, and you become much more self-aware of what's going on inside of you, how you're reacting to things. So that's, again, just a huge part of self-regulation. Working music is great for working memory, selective attention, cognitive flexibility. These are all challenged when learning how to play a musical instrument. When I've been learning how to play guitar, and I can tell you this is true. Especially self-regulation, not to take the guitar and just bash it over. That and my friend's guitar, I don't want to buzz it, it's a very nice one. Theater is performance. It's carefully choreographed and it requires all the participants on stage and backstage. It helps with timing and managing behavior. Strategy games, computer games, all of these things that teach logic. Computer games can be very useful as long as time limits are observed. Obviously, again, it goes back to that self-regulation and those cat videos we were talking about. There's a company out there called Common Sense Media, which does reviews on computer games for kids. And they can tell you a lot about the computer games that are out there that are really, really good for kids, which ones you might want to stay away from. So let's talk about a little bit about crisis prevention and intervention. So there's 7 steps. I have Farouk Assault there. I just thought of Farouk Assault. When I was looking for a picture, I was like, Farouk Assault! So there's 7 stages of behavior escalation. The first is the calm, when someone is cooperative and accepts corrective feedback, following directions, personal consent, personal goals. Very easy to ignore distractions and accept praise. And then there's phase 2, which is the trigger phase. There's a conflict or a failure or a change in routine that can cause a person to feel that pressure, which results in ineffective problem solving and ending up facing correctional procedures, right? So for instance, you have somebody who's working on a situation and then all of a sudden something happens and they're in the moment and they're not thinking rationally because they're just concentrating, they're in the moment. And all of a sudden you can see them just start to, maybe they have a body language where they tighten up, their shoulders get really tense or their abs get really tense, right? So you have that trigger phase. The next phase is agitation. That's when the overall behavior is unfocused and distracted. They're off task. They might argue or they might get snappy. They might leave their seat. or they may bother others or socially withdraw. Phase 4 is that acceleration, where the overall behavior is stack engaged, leading to further negative interactions. They may question you, they may argue with you, they may threaten you, they may show non-compliance and defiance, and they may provoke others to join them, right? And a lot of times, when somebody's in this phase, especially if they're in a group situation, what can happen? They can trigger other people, can't they? Boom, you're here, and then you've got stair-step phases, and they're all going at the same time. So trick 1 is remain calm, right? Finally, phase 6 is that de-escalation, where the overall behavior shows confusion and lack of focus. They might withdraw, they might have denial, they might blame others, but they start to respond to those concrete directions, right? And then finally, we have the recovery phase, where they show an eagerness for busy work, they might still be reluctant to interact, and they might want to be alone. They might want to work alone for a little while. Sometimes they might even want to go to sleep.
This is great stuff just to teach your clients too, like, what do you feel like when you're triggered? What does your body do? Does it feel hot? Does your heart race? Does you,
Right.
you know, so it's that real physical trigger stuff. Usually that's the first cue, and they never recognize that.
Exactly. So in the trigger phase, there's several interventions here that you can use to help, and those are focused on prevention and redirection. So those are things like interventions with a curriculum if you're a teacher, counseling, community services, medical assistance. Before you correct the behavior, try to maybe, if you can, anticipate what the problem might be and get the trigger out of the way before it even happens. Then addressing those other triggers like conferences or meetings or maybe some things that you might need to do, like wraparound services, things that can help with that. Okay, the agitation phase, that's when your interventions are really going to be focused on reducing anxiety. So before a behavior can escalate, you can do things like, what are some of the things you might be able to do?
Redirect.
Redirect, yep.
Maybe remove them from, if they're in a group setting, maybe remove them from the group and just talk to them and say, it seems like it looks like you're starting to kind of get keyed up. Is something triggering you?
Yes.
This is what I'm seeing and this is why, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Exactly. Sometimes doing the unexpected, right? Where you might see him get triggered, that's like redirect, right? Kind of a distraction. Woo! Where, listen, the group's going along, and somebody gets triggered, and guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up and do a tap dance for you.
Yep.
That'll stop them, won't it? Don't do what I just did. I'm sure you guys are much better dancers than I am.
I think changing the setting too, as far as even if it's like a coworker's in the same office, or you're in a waiting area, saying let's go over here and talk, or let's go grab a pop real quick in the
let's
kitchen.
go take a walk around the block.
Yeah,
absolutely. Start making non-emotional requests as opposed to emotional requests, right? How about the broken record technique? That may be a little aggravating to you sometimes, but you're going to start sounding like a broken record, but sometimes it's very effective. Somebody needs to hear that more than once. Reducing distance or proximity can help as well. And then giving them time to think about things and decide things. We always tell folks to allow for silence, allow for time to make a decision. When you are agitated and anxious, are you making the best decisions you possibly can? Probably not, right? So if we allow somebody to have that time for reflection, that silent time, it's okay. Because sometimes they need a few minutes to process everything that's going on. So just allow them that time, right? Using their name can be a huge way of bringing them back to the present moment as well. Okay, so strategies that work during the agitation phase, empathy. Obviously, empathy is going to work. If I can relate to you, or you can relate to me, if I'm triggered and I'm anxious, and you can say to me, you know what, I understand what you're going through. I know how this made me feel when this happened to me. It's going to go a long way. It's going to first of all, it's going to distract me. And second of all, it's going to be like, I'm not alone. That's a really, really valuable feeling for somebody to have. Allowing them space, giving them choices. A lot of times when somebody's agitated or they're triggered, they feel like something's out of their control. Now, if somebody's had a lot of trauma in their past traumatic events happen to them, they oftentimes already feel like their life is already out of control. So giving them some choices and making them feel like they are in control can go a whole heck of a long way. Giving them some preferred activities. If you have somebody, if you're doing an activity with someone and they get agitated by that activity, offer them an alternative. What's the harm, right? The goal is going to be met. It's just going to be met in a different way than you might have planned. And that's okay. Having a prearranged signal. I used to have a teacher when I was in 3rd grade who we all knew things were getting bad when she never crossed her arms unless we were in trouble. So when Sister Mary Joseph stood up there with her arms crossed like this, we all knew, oh, we better calm down. So having that prearranged signal can go a long way in letting people, oh yeah, maybe sometimes you can touch your nose, do your little Carol Burnett ear thing, whatever works for you, right? And then working on some relaxation techniques as well. Telling kids, okay, you know what? Let's take a moment and just sit here and just take a breath and breathe. It's okay, we're just going to relax right now. All right, so how many of you have wondered, let's think about here for a second, the difference between empathy and sympathy. I'm going to show you this video. It's really good. Some of you may have seen it. It's Brene Brown. How many of you have heard of Brene Brown? She's amazing.
Oh, good.
She is.
It's one of my
She's
favorites.
amazing. She's a psychologist. She is from Texas, and so I'm prejudiced because I'm from Texas too. And she has authored many books on empathy, and she's also. Let's see, what else could I do? She's a favorite of Oprah. She has a lot of TED Talks out there. This TED Talk, this was a portion of a TED Talk that somebody created an animation to. You might have seen this floating around Facebook. It did make the rounds a couple of times. Anyway, one of the books that I would highly recommend by Brene Brown is Daring Greatly. She talks about vulnerability, empathy, and sympathy. And it's an amazing book. So I'm going to let you watch this video. And I'll meet you on the other side of it.
How do you spell her first name?
Brene. It's B-R-E-N-E. Daring Greatly.
Yeah, tons of good stuff from her. She's really inspirational just
She's
as an
amazing.
individual for yourself.
Yeah.
Not to mention everything else.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Love it so much.
Okay, so obviously there are some things you don't want to do when somebody's agitated, right? There you go. Raising your voice, not a good strategy. Sarcasm, and I'm guilty. Who's guilty? We're all guilty of it, aren't we, at one time or another? Sarcasm, we do it. We're human beings. We're not always going to be perfect, right? Holding a grudge. That's another one that I'm really, really, really bad at. I'm really good at it, but I'm bad at it, you know what I'm saying? So holding a grudge, we don't know what someone has gone through. We don't know. This may be the only time in their life they get this dysregulated. But do we want to hold that against them? Or any other time that they become dysregulated. We don't want to hold that against them. They're human beings. They're multifaceted. And things are going to happen in life. It happens. So, making assumptions, attacking a person's character, comparing with their siblings or events or anything else in their life, you don't want to do that. Okay, so the acceleration phase is when we really start working on safety. We want to make sure that all of those triggering factors are removed, if we can do that. Did you have a question? Okay. We want to be able to make sure that we're approaching people, students, clients, in a way that doesn't threaten them. When you're agitated, do you want somebody in your face? No, not at all, right? So we want to make sure that we're approaching them at a respectful distance and in a way that's not going to agitate them or make them feel more threatened.
I have a question. Do you have a suggestion? I've noticed in my work setting, I recognize sometimes coworkers that are agitating the situation even more and maybe are not even aware of their behaviors. How, as a outside person, you can intervene and not make the situation worse, but try to have them recognize, oh, you're making this.
You know, I can't speak to it in a therapeutic sense because I'm not a therapist, but I can tell you when I've been in that situation, the best thing I can do, the best thing that I've ever done is just be assertive and say, hey, you know what? This person is very upset right now. Can you please control your behavior or maybe leave? Or sometimes getting that person out of that space is the most effective thing to do as well. I'm not afraid to step in and say, hey, you know, that's not cool.
You could also wait and let it play out and then just later go say, gosh, that situation seems like it got kind of heated. What happened? Or, you know, like really make it about how, you know, how the situation went. Maybe they'll talk about it a little bit and see if you can't, in a very, you know, get them to see it differently.
Well, and I work in the, there's a lot of, we have the alternative education program.
Sure.
And I think that schooling setting really triggers the kids to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
And then it's already a trigger and then it just escalates from there. So you recognize that trigger, but I know when like coworkers are in the moment, they just, it's like, get your worksheet done. And it's
I hear
they
you.
don't care about the worksheet right now.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to remember who the adult is.
Yeah.
We all go back to our kid
for
sheet
sure.
Well, and the worst part about that is that she probably doesn't even know she's doing it. She
Yeah. Well, and I like your suggestion afterwards because sometimes
maybe not direct in the moment because that would make her look silly.
and that's the hard part is because there's other students in the classroom, so then it's that that power struggle of having the authority of the other students too.
Sure.
But, and they're teenagers, so they kind of show they puff up their chest and whatever.
Well, Lisa, you're super good at recognizing that, so,
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it would be worth your while to probably, try and figure out how to address that. because
Yeah,
Well,
you
you
would have a
can
much
see it
easier
happening
time.
before where the kids are like, you just see the body language, it's like, it's getting worse, it's getting worse.
Yeah,
Oh, there it
I
goes.
love Steph's suggestion of maybe
Yeah.
waiting, because I think of it, I was like, I see folks in my office kind of getting escalated with each other, I'd be like, whoa. But in that type of situation, it is best to maybe just wait until everything's on, and that way, the sanity on both ends is preserved.
And there's also an aspect of if you add embarrassment in a
Yes.
bad situation,
Yes,
often instead of de-escalating, it actually gets worse because now you've added another factor of why they feel
Exactly.
like they're not doing
it right.
well.
exactly, yes. Okay, so here we're focusing again on the crisis management and the safe strategies and the behavioral emergencies. These are some short-term interventions. You can isolate the students, Steph mentioned that a little earlier, allowing time for them to cool down, having to remove folks from the situation, things like that. Okay, so intervention strategies for the de-escalation phase, very similar to some of the stuff that we've already talked about. Avoiding blame, allowing time and space, cool down time, and the appropriate time for debrief. Okay, then finally recovery phase, that's really when you want to follow through with any consequences, if there have been consequences. Reinforce any displays of appropriate behavior. Hey, I noticed, things were getting a little heated, but I saw that you took some time to think it through, giving them that labeled praise, okay? And then rehearse problem-solving routines so that things can, next time something like that happens, you have it's kind of like a fire drill. We do fire drills over and over again so we can just think, we don't even have to think when that alarm goes off, right? So when you can rehearse the problem-solving routines with your clients or with your students, then you can give them, okay, this is gonna happen now. I don't even have to think about it. I know what I'm gonna do. So we do just want to give you touch bases on verbal de-escalation. Remember that reasoning with somebody who's agitated is kind of like talking to a wall. Okay, you're not going to be able to do it when they're agitated. So when somebody is agitated, your priority is to make sure that you can kind of bring them back to calm, right? And then finally, remember that de-escalation techniques, as we saw at the beginning of in the video, these are not inherent. We are not born knowing these. They have to be learned, and they are in a way kind of counterintuitive because we have fight, flight, freeze, right? When we're agitated or something has triggered us, we're either going to fight it, we're going to run from it, or we're going to freeze in place. So learning to de-escalate is kind of counterintuitive to how our brain wants to respond to an emergency, to a trigger. Okay, so to be effective, we have to remain calm and centered. And so these skills require practice, and there's nothing wrong with practicing those skills in any situation. Okay, so we're kind of short on time, unfortunately, so I'll just go through, there is a worksheet. You have two things that are with your handouts, with your notes. You have some tips, just basically the same tips that we just went through. And then we also have the interrupt, ignore, redirect, and reward process of crisis intervention. So interrupting means interrupting the minute you start to see these behaviors, okay? And then ignoring any of those challenges. Like, have you ever had a kid who's agitated or you're babysitting or something and you have a kid say, you can't tell me what to do, you're not the boss of me. That's a
Your own child?
Your own child.
Your own kids,
Ignoring those challenging questions to just focus on the situation and be in the moment, right? Doesn't mean ignore the situation, it just means ignoring the challenge. Because if you challenge somebody, what's going to happen? You're going to get into that battle of wills? You might get agitated, right? Finally, redirect the behavior, redirecting that behavior, and then rewarding the appropriate behavior. So there is a worksheet worksheet if you want to go through it when you have a chance. It has all of those cues on there. And I thank you. Does anybody have any other questions?
I have just a couple other follow-up things. Like Kim said, we do this de-stress project here, and this is just a small kind of snippet of some of the training that we can provide. So if you want Tammy, Michelle to come into your agency, at a staff meeting or do a small training, there's a variety of things that you can train on. They're really great at it, and we're happy to do that. That's part of the grant, is to get all this out in the community. The other thing is, I didn't really think that, usually Deb Miller comes from MSUB Extension, and she brings OPI CEUs. So if you want an OPI credit or a CEU for this, just put a check mark by your name and I will get those for you.
Well, I hope that you all got something out of this, and I thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with the parking. Again, my information is on these sheets, so if you are interested in further training, Michelle and I would be more than happy to discuss all of the different things that we can train you on. Please don't hesitate to give me a call. My email and my phone number are on there. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.